PC handhelds are wild. It's such a crazy market that's always evolving and changing, and it didn't really exist just a couple years ago. At this point, I've actually owned and tested and used most major PC handheld that's come out in the past couple years. And it actually started for me with the Steam Deck. I was one of those people who pre-ordered the Steam Deck as soon as it got announced, and I was so stoked. And man, it's been such a long journey since then. I've owned and used so many of these things. So why, after testing all of these different devices, some of them being the most powerful that have come out to date, why would I get rid of all of them and go back to the Steam Deck OLED? On paper, it sounds kind of crazy and it makes no sense. But the funny thing is, the experience of doing this kind of changed how I think about handhelds in general nowadays. It was a fun experiment, and what actually happened surprised me. So picture this, the Steam Deck came out and it was amazing. I loved it so much, played the heck out of it. And then a couple months later, Asus came out with the ROG Ally. So then I ended up getting rid of my Steam Deck and switching to the ROG Ally because it was supposed to be so much more powerful. And then next thing you know, another handheld comes out, the Legion Go. Ended up buying that device and testing it. And a couple months later, another device comes out, and another, and along the way, they're getting slightly more powerful and more powerful. And it's safe to say, after testing so many of these different devices, I can say that they've all kind of had their ups and downs. There are things to like and to dislike about all sorts of different PC handhelds. But the thing is, I was definitely chasing the top specs. I got into this habit of feeling like I constantly needed to own the most powerful handheld that hit the market because I wanted to be able to experience it. I wanted to be able to launch those AAA titles that have just come out and to try to maximize the amount of frames I'm getting on those games. And at a certain point, the technology kind of plateaued, meaning the performance kind of hit the ceiling. Most all of the PC handhelds were getting around the same amount of performance. And this really started to make everything feel very unclear. What device did I really want? What did I want to hold on to when there was nothing left to really upgrade to? So then I've got this laundry list of these different devices, right? So then I started paying really close attention to what features in those handhelds were like a non-negotiable for me. What are the features that I wouldn't be able to give up? What did I absolutely need in a PC handheld, especially if I'm spending all this money for one? And for me personally, one major aspect of a handheld became the screen, particularly making sure it had an OLED screen. So let me paint a picture for you. At this point, my entire ecosystem of technology kind of revolves around OLED technology. My living room TV is an OLED panel. My gaming monitor is an OLED monitor. Even my iPhone has an OLED panel in it. And this isn't to say that LCD screens are bad. Quite the contrary. I think LCD screens can be really great, especially some of these PC handhelds that have come out recently. The screens are almost comparable to OLED panels. But again, spending so much time with my own eyes, observing these really deep blacks and these ultra vibrant colors and refresh rates that, can't really compare with LCD, I really became aware of the difference between the two, and it became really difficult to separate them, meaning it's not impossible for me to enjoy an experience on an LCD screen, but I would kind of be left craving that OLED experience that I've come to know and to love and appreciate. And I can say, wow, transitioning back to the Steam Deck OLED, having that gorgeous, vibrant screen that gets up to 1000 nits peak brightness with HDR, with about 7.5 inches of real estate on that screen. Wow, it's just a great combination. It's such a lovely piece of technology. And there are some other reality checks I had to, kind of take into consideration when I was transitioning back to the Steam Deck OLED. Whereas before I was really just, having the ability to play any sort of game I could throw at the other PC handhelds. When going back to the Steam Deck OLED, I had to realize I wouldn't really be able to do that in the same way. But when I took a closer look at my Steam library, it kind of caused me to realize most of the games I'm playing nowadays on handheld are these lighter weight indie titles. And truly, this was even the case with the more powerful handhelds that I've tested. So games like, your Call of Duty or your Black Myth Wukong or your Red Dead Redemption 2, you gotta consider whether you're really gonna be enjoying playing that kind of game on such a small device where, you might be having a better time sitting at a desk, using your desktop gaming PC or your console if you've got one. And for me, this was a pretty big realization, coming to terms with the fact that just because I have all this power in this headroom, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm always going to gravitate to playing these really power-intensive games. And this is something that the Steam Deck OLED has obviously really excelled at. In terms of PC handhelds, the Steam Deck OLED is kind of the king of indies. It's the glorified champion of crushing Steam backlogs. Not to mention, if you are running these very intensive AAA style games where you have to crank the device to its max wattage to even be able to get the amount of frames to play the game stably, you really need to consider the trade-offs that come with that. Because a lot of times it's noise, it's heat, it's battery drain, and it's constantly tweaking those settings to get the game running in a way where you feel comfortable playing it. So all of this to say, I really started to value balance over peak specs, and owning the Steam Deck again has really helped to clarify that for me. Another thing that really surprised me after going back was not just the experience of playing these simpler games, but the experience of using the device itself feeling simpler and just more enjoyable in general. Less speed bumps, less roadblocks, less obstacles to try to overcome. What do I mean by that? Well, SteamOS, as opposed to Windows OS, it feels like a console. It feels like hitting that button on your Xbox or, on your Xbox controller and just seeing the thing boot up, and boom, you're there in the operating system. You choose the game you want to play and you're playing it. You have the option to tweak settings, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. And at the end of the day, I think that's really what we all want in a gaming experience, regardless of, how you are playing that game, whether it's a desktop or a console or a handheld. You want the device to fade into the background. You want to be absorbed by the game that you're playing. You want to feel completely immersed. You don't want to have to deal with all of these distractions around you. But, with that being said, it's not all butterflies and rainbows. If you're using SteamOS on, something like the Steam Deck or another gaming handheld, you got to consider that Linux comes with its list of limitations. And one of the main ones is anti-cheat. And where that comes into play is if you really enjoy your multiplayer experiences, because due to anti-cheat limitations, majority of the popular titles are not actually going to run. But again, that's just about knowing what kind of games you truly want to experience and you want to play on your handheld and choosing the right device to fit those needs. And for my current habits and the way that I like to play on my handhelds, that trade-off ended up making a lot of sense for me, and in the end, it didn't really matter too much. So all in all, going back to the Steam Deck OLED after trying so many different varieties of PC handhelds, from the top of the top to, middle tier to your wacky boutique Chinese manufacturers, man, it was like a breath of fresh air. It was so clarifying. And I'm not here to say that the Steam Deck OLED is perfect. It's fitting my current needs and helping to, again, clarify what aspects of a handheld matter most to me. But it's not perfect, Part of what I've realized is, even though it's working for me right now, I really do crave having a smaller OLED experience, something like a 7-inch OLED screen, a little bit better battery efficiency, which would come with a more modern, upgraded processor, and just a small amount of power bump, because some of the 3D indie games that I like to play, depending on how they were made or how they were optimized, some of them might not run as well on the Steam Deck OLED as it would on a device that had a little bit more powerful of a processor. So the case in point here is this, after this whole experience, now instead of chasing specs really blindly, I really clearly know now what aspects of a handheld are most important to me and what kind of balance I'm going to be looking for when I go to purchase that next PC handheld, which hopefully will kind of be endgame for me at this point. So if you could take anything away from this video, have it be this. Know what kind of games you personally actually enjoy playing, and if those kind of games would be the type of experience that you would enjoy playing on a handheld to begin with. Set realistic expectations, because no handheld is made absolutely perfect, and no handheld is going to check every single box. It's a balancing act. Don't be like me and waste all of this time and energy collecting all these different handhelds, chasing these top specs, when really it ends up being a waste of time and money because you don't end up using every feature that the most expensive handhelds can offer. But most importantly, don't forget that older hardware like the Steam Deck OLED can still be extremely enjoyable, and it can actually be the best value for you if you know exactly what you want to play and that device can play those games. In closing, coming back to the Steam Deck didn't feel like a downgrade whatsoever. It felt clarifying, and I'm so glad that I did this experiment because it opened my eyes to what really matters most to me. If you've made it to the end of the video, I just want to say thank you so much for watching through it or listening through it. It truly means the world that you would spend this small section of your day listening to my opinions and participating in this crazy niche we all enjoy and love. And speaking of which, if you'd like to share with me what your current favorite handheld is, drop a comment down below. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you all have to share and possibly opening up a dialogue. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. But until the next video, this is it for me. My name has been Tom, and I'll see you next time. Bye.